There is an old adage that goes, you cannot teach old dogs new tricks. And basically, it's talking about the fact that, well, people can never really change. You are who you are, and that's who you will always be. But as Christians, we need to recognize that that is not true. And Saul today is a perfect example of that, both of the adage and how it's wrong. As Saul comes into Jerusalem, the disciples are truly frightened. They had heard and they knew who Saul was, what he had done, how he had really harmed the church and did all he could to destroy it. And now they hear that he has come to proclaim the gospel of Christ. And they simply don't buy it. It's not possible. We know who you are. We know what you've done. We know who you will be. But they were wrong. They missed the mark. Because they forgot one important lesson of who's actually in charge. And as we listen to the story of Saul, it's not just Saul or Paul's story. It's the story of so many saints in the life of our church who led lives that, well, people would not consider very holy until they truly met the Lord. And it changed everything for them. We just have to look at the life of one of the greatest saints, St. Augustine, who, well, to use Jesus' description of the kind of life he lived, was one of dissipation. And yet, as he encountered Christ in his heart, though it did not happen quickly, unlike Paul, as he encountered the Lord, his heart began to change. And he began to change. And that change is so necessary. Because the problem is, so often we treat our saints as though they're superheroes. They're like way up here. We're way down here. We can never be like them. We can admire them, but, they're saints. They're better than us. But the reality is, the saints are no different than us. They were sinners, and their lives, all of them except for one. There's one exception. Mary. Outside of that, every saint had to change their lives. Some from the quote-unquote life of dissipation, others to just deepening their relationship with Christ and making it even more of what it can be. But as we think about this truth, the need to change, because as I say to anyone, and I do believe this is true, if you feel comfortable in your faith, it's because you're not living it. My faith honestly challenges me every day to change, to grow, to deepen, to recognize what is wrong and how it needs to move in a new direction. But the reality is, we cannot do this on our own. Jesus tells us that. Because without me, you can do nothing. What we might see as impossible in the change of the life of another is possible because of God. For all things are possible with God. And once we understand that truth and reality, we also have to recognize another problem we can run into. It's sort of two old heresies that are connected to each other, and I think many Catholics fall into them once in a while, including myself. They were called Pelagianism and semi-Pelagianism. So Pelagianism basically believes we can accomplish any good we want without any need or help from God. And semi-Pelagianism says, well, I can begin the good work, but I would need God's grace at some point. And both of these are heresies. Because as Jesus tells us, you can accomplish nothing without me. Without the grace of God, we are incapable of change. We are incapable of doing anything good, actually, without the grace of God. But with that grace, all things are possible. All change is possible. We just have to open our hearts to what it is God is trying to do within us. Because I can guarantee you, God is trying to change you. This isn't just a one-time event in our lives. The need to change and grow is a permanent reality. As Jesus tells us, that is when God prunes us so that we can bear more gifts and become more integrated into the vine that is Christ. May we be open to this gift of the Lord. May we recognize what it is that God is trying to do within us. Let us accept the truth that we can accomplish nothing without Christ. And let us therefore open our hearts to the grace He desires to pour in us. May we seek to truly be pruned by our God in order to grow in bearing fruit for Christ. Through the ages, people have believed that it is impossible for someone to change. Saul, who became Paul, and all of the saints in our church disprove that. May we simply follow their example and become that vine of Christ.